Hello, I'm Jeff DeGraff. This video is part of a series on how to make innovation happen. Each of these videos will give you the tools and techniques necessary to jumpstart innovation in your organization. At the end, you'll be asked some questions that will help you put these tools and techniques to work where you work. So let's get started. In this video, we will explore how to think prismatically and how to synchronize the forces of innovation. The first thing we need to do to be great innovators is we need to develop an innovation mindset and an innovation language. This is the innovation genome. The innovation genome has three unique features to it. First of all, it demonstrates that types of innovation are often in conflict with each other. But this is actually a good thing if it's creative. Constructive conflict drives innovation because it helps us create higher order solutions or hybrids, new ways of approaching things. Two, it has an ability to gauge the speed and magnitude at which we want to innovate, or how much innovation and how fast do we need it. And three, it gives us a way to talk about the sequence of innovation. What should happen first and what should happen last, and everything in between. Now I want to start with the first and the most obvious form of innovation, the create form of innovation. The create form of innovation is the one that people most often associate with innovation because it's about doing new things. It's about being breakthrough or radical. It's about making that miracle drug, that incredible product that nobody thought was possible. And it's about speculating new markets or creating new markets. Now, along with the breakthrough also comes radical risk. So this is typically where we find startup companies, and the reason is startup companies cannot compete on scope or the range of products or scale or the size of the organization as opposed to an incumbent firm. Now, when we think about this green form of innovation, this create form of innovation, what holds them together is their vision of the future. So this is where you think about Steve Jobs and sort of imagining what's going to happen with handheld devices, or Walt Disney, where we think about what's going to happen with the world of entertainment. Create leaders are typically associated with visionary leaders. They're clever, they're optimistic. They're also notoriously distracted because they pick up every pretty pebble on the beach. When you go to a workplace that's a create workplace, you're going to see a lot of activity. You're going to see a lot of people working independently on projects. You're going to see a lot of experiments, and you're going to feel the energy in that workplace. There's going to be a lot of questions about focus and alignment, but that's really not the aim of the create form of innovation. The control form of innovation is the opposite of the create form of innovation. This form of innovation is about doing things right. Where the create form of innovation is creating variation, creating deviance, this form of innovation is reducing variation and reducing deviance through the implementation of standards. Now, standards are used to create quality so we don't make mistakes, and standards are used to create efficiency so we do things more effective. We're almost always going to find this kind of innovation where three things are present. Number one, failure is not an option. If you bring that spacecraft back to Earth the wrong way, you perform the surgery the wrong way, bad things happen. Number two, it's almost always a scale business. So whether you're selling hamburgers or you're selling oil, you're selling a lot of it and it has to be replicable. And the third is it's almost always used where there's a lot of complexity. So if you're designing an aircraft that's going to fly for 50 years, we're going to have some ability to keep everything in order. So when we look at these kinds of leaders who are really associated with this control form of innovation, we're going to find a lot of process, a lot of 12-step processes, a lot of technology. These leaders are typically going to be pragmatic, scientific, by the book, use engineering techniques. There's going to be procedures for things. And the workplace is going to be highly standardized. There's going to be policies and procedures. There's going to be rules of how to do things. There's going to be a lot of roles and responsibilities. Now, the first thing I want you to understand is this tension between the create form of innovation and this tension between the control form of innovation is not about style. It's about value. One form of innovation actually destroys the other. So think about this for a moment. Anytime you try and make a radical or breakthrough product or service, what happens to quality? It goes down. The control form of innovation literally goes down because you're introducing variation. What happens if you have a lot of steps in your innovation process to your ability to make a breakthrough product? It goes away because you're eliminating variation. So it's not about style that control and compete are in conflict with each other. It's about the absolute form of value that they create. But remember, this form of conflict is actually good because it makes these forms of value produce new types of innovation, hybrid types of innovation. Let's move on and talk about the yellow quadrant, or the collaborate form of innovation. And this is doing things that last. So I want you to think about organizations that have been around for a long time that are really held together by their values. Maybe it's a university, maybe it's a not-for-profit, maybe it's a customer service organization or a professional service organization where individuals give you some wonderful advice. These types of organizations pursue community, and this is a fancy way of saying the glue. The culture and the competency that holds us together is one of the main concerns of this quadrant. It also produces knowledge. Think about how you get smarter. You hire the right people, you develop the right people, you coach the right people, you rotate the right people through the organization, and that's exactly what this type of organization does. Now, when we think about the yellow quadrant, what I want you to think about is value-centered organizations, and I want you to think about leaders who really lead through values. So they see potential in people and they coach people, and usually they're very good listeners and they're very empowering to people. I also want you to think about these wonderful yellow workplaces. They're very informal, they're very family-oriented, they often are very communicative, and they often expand out into the community where we enroll other types of people. Now, this form of innovation, the magnitude of this is not nearly as great as the create form of innovation. It's sort of a moderate form of innovation, and the amount of time it takes to build this is very long. It takes a lot of time to build a good community or a good relationship. But there's an amazing upside to this form of innovation, and that is it's the most sustainable. Once you've got the right culture and the right competency, it's going to hang around for a long, long time. Now, the final form of innovation is the compete form of innovation, and this is about doing things now. This is what investors love. This is the form of innovation normally associated with a business, because this form of innovation is about going very fast, and it's about creating profits and revenue or some type of goal that's tangible that people hold in high value. So think about the most valuable companies on Wall Street or around the world on the different exchanges. They're going to be companies that pay high revenues in short periods of time, quarter to quarter to quarter. So big industrials, investment banks, companies that never miss on their earnings targets. And I want you to think about the leaders of these companies because they're held together by their goals. So a leader is going to be very impatient, assertive, driven. They're going to try and overcome barriers. And they're also going to have workplaces that are highly competitive. Winners and losers are common in this form of innovation. Best in class, maybe not best in class. They're very much driving for those particular types of results, and these workplaces are going to feel very quantifiable and very, very pushing the envelope to get to a higher form of earnings. Now, in the same way that the create form of innovation and the control form of innovation are at conflict over the magnitude of innovation, the compete form of innovation and the collaborate form of innovation are in conflict over the speed. Do I go very fast in the compete form of innovation but not be very sustainable? Or am I very sustainable in the yellow form of innovation but maybe miss my target or miss my interesting turn where I'm going to make money? So altogether, this is much more than just a style issue. This has to do with how you view the world, your concept of time, what you believe is valuable, how you communicate, and it doesn't just happen at the individual level. It happens at the level of the individual. It happens at what type of culture and competency the individual is most comfortable in. It happens at the level of what types of tools and methods for innovation those organizations embrace, and most importantly, it has to do with what type of strategy and ultimately what type of value your organization is able to create in the market or the competitive landscape at which it exists. So what we're going to need in order to make innovation happen is all four of these to work together. We're going to need values to work with goals. We're going to need vision to work with process. These are going to be in conflict, but we want them in constructive conflict so that we can make things better and new. Now, the key here is how we create is what we create. So I want you to think about this like it's a toolbox. You have a hammer and a wrench and a saw. They're all incredibly valuable tools, but you can't use them interchangeably. So for example, suppose you want a lot of radical innovation in your organization. Well, that's a create or green form of innovation that's going to bring a lot of risk. We're going to run a lot of experiments. We're going to hire different kinds of people. We're going to speculate new markets. But what a lot of organizations do is they try and use the opposite tools. So for example, let's say we're going to use the control toolbox and we're going to use 12-step processes and a lot of technologies and a checklist. Well, that's great if we're trying to create quality and efficiency, which is the values that the control quadrant creates. But if we're trying to create radical innovation and we're trying to create new market growth, it's probably the worst thing we could do. So remember, when you pick your approach to innovation, the way you pick it is by starting at the outcome that you want first and working backwards. Now it's your turn to put these innovation methods to work where you work. Think about the innovation genome. What type is your strength? What type is your weakness? What type is your team's strength? What type is your team's weakness? What strength can you build on? What strength can your team build on?